Welcome to Beyond Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Petralis, and we are really excited for another great guest. And again, we're continuing our journey into the world of high school basketball. And before we do that, I just want to thank a couple of coaches. Coach Jane Keene of Malden Catholic Girls Basketball gave me some nice team swag, sent me in the mail, and I want to give a shout out to him, as well as Megan Olson, a head lacrosse coach at Medford High School, sent me some awesome Medford Girls lacrosse gear. So I just want to give a shout out to those two past coaches. Great people, great coaches, great program. So I thank you for that. But today's guest, an incredible guest. I'm just going to read off a few accolades about this coach so you understand the world that we're going to be in today. This coach is the current head girls basketball coach at Hanover High School since 2005, was the Mass Basketball Coaches Coach of the Year in 2015-2016 season. And also in 2015-2016 had a 20-0 regular season. And we know as coaching world, no matter what sport it is, going undefeated in the regular season, it takes a great leadership and it takes a great squad. And, it's kind of accumulation of a lot of different things. So I'm really excited to dive into that with Coach tonight. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, the head coach of Hanover High School girls basketball team, Brian Fisher.
How you doing?
Good. Thanks for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This is great. It's a great opportunity.
Yeah. So, we're going to kind of dive right into it. So, I usually ask my guests, the first question is just how they kind of got into the world of coaching. But, for people that might know you personally or, know the world that you come from, your dad is a legendary high school basketball coach. He had over 600 wins. I mean, I have a couple of things written down right here. 600 wins. He was also won the Lifetime Achievement Award for the Boston Amateur Basketball Club, which is incredible. And he's included in 4 different Hall of Fames: the New England Basketball Association Hall of Fame, the Mass Coaches Hall of Fame, the Bentley and the Rockland Athletics Hall of Fame. So you come from a great prodigy of basketball. So I'm going to give you a chance to give you the floor here to say, how did you get your coaching start and where did it come from?
Yeah, well, as you kind of mentioned, it runs in the blood, obviously. And you mentioned my dad being in the Bentley Hall of Fame. And actually, he was one of the first captains at Bentley College. It was Bentley College before it was Bentley University. And he started the basketball program, helped start the basketball program at Bentley College. So he's a well-known figure up there. He has a camp every summer up there. So it's interesting you bring up the Bentley, because there's that connection there. But as for me, as I said, it runs in the family. My dad, obviously, he's been coaching. He's won 2 state championships, 1972 with Rockland, and I believe I'm drawing a blank on the second year, but it was in the 2000s. So growing up around that atmosphere, always going to the games. And I remember when he was coaching at, Rockland, Rockland has 2 gyms. They have a front gym and they have a back gym. And I remember going up to the games, and then, we'd go in the back gym and we'd just kind of shoot around, with some of my buddies, some of the friends. So I never really watched his games, but I was always around the game while he was coaching up at Rockland High School. So it was a great opportunity for me to be up there. Now I'm actually teaching at Rockland High School, so kind of following in his footsteps in that sense. But growing up in that atmosphere, seeing him coaching, I've obviously played basketball. I played at Sacred Heart in Kingston, which is no longer there, and I played up through my junior year, and I was very close with the Rockland kids. My grandparents and everyone on my mom's side was from Rockland, and my dad being up in Rockland, so Rockland was like my home away from home, my second home. So I was friends with a lot of the kids on the Rockland team. And while I was at Sacred Heart, I played through my junior year, and then had kind of a little run-in with the coach at the time, and and actually end up quitting that year, and that was 2000. That was 93. I ended up quitting in 93, and I was so afraid to quit because I was like, oh, I'm going to tell my dad this, and he's going to be disappointed. But he was very, very supportive of it. He understood why. But that gave me an opportunity my senior year to help be with my friends up at Rockland, but also help him coach as my senior year. So, I went and I scouted basketball games with him, I went to different places. So I really, got my feet wet at that point. And again, I was just kind of like probably a scout or just a kind of an observer, but it was still an awesome experience. I remember going to games with my dad and then Tom Bailey, his longtime assistant coach. And that really, kind of got me going and got me interested. And I've always been involved with basketball. And then in '96, I'd gone to Johnson State up in Vermont. I think it's University of Vermont at Johnson now. I'm not sure. And I went up there for 2 years. And in 1996, my dad's longtime assistant, Tom Bailey, had an opportunity to coach at Plymouth South High School. And he did not want to take the job unless he would get me, if I was interested, to be his assistant coach. My dad really encouraged him to do it. And he was like, I'll do it as long as, your son, will do it. So he called me, talked to me about it. And I was like, I'm in,
Yeah.
I'm in. So I got my start as a JV coach at Plymouth South High School. And I was there for a couple years. My dad at that time, he had retired from basketball. He stepped away for a couple years to watch my brother play. My brother played at Marshfield High School. And he actually, my brother, I would think it was 98 or 97. His team went 20-0 as well. And they're Division I. And Division I is tough. So they go 20-0 and you play the lower seed. And the lower seed happened to be BC High. So that's not an easy, when you're undefeated. And they end up losing that game. But my dad had taken time off, and that's why Bales was the coach at Plymouth South. And then after my brother graduated, he got his alma mater's at Quincy, so he went up to Quincy High School. And while he was at Quincy High School, I helped out, I did the freshman, helped out with the JV program while he was there. And then in '03, I got a call from Hanover High School. And actually, no, he wasn't was it Quincy at that time? No, I think it was Quincy was a little bit later. So I might have I think I have my dates wrong, because I know in 2003, I believe I have the book somewhere too, but I was the freshman coach at Hanover High School. And then was it the following year? It's so long ago. But 1 year I was the freshman coach at Rockland, and my dad was still the athletic director there. And that was before he'd gone. It had to have been before he'd gone to Quincy, because he would be an athletic director at Rockland and coach up in Quincy.
Yeah, listen, you've been coaching for so many years. Every year seems the same, and I get it.
It does. So I know because I was at Hanover in 2003. As a freshman coach, and then 2004, I believe I was at the Rockland freshman coach. And that following year, Fran Coyle, who was the athletic director at Hanover High School, called me, and he said, "Look, there's an opening for at the varsity level. I really would love to have you take that responsibility on." And of course, being around coaching, and this is, big opportunity. And I was like, yeah, I am all on board. I'd be happy to do it. And I was able to, start my journey at Hanover High School in 2005 and to get to where I am right now. So, and it's kind of a long story, but there's a long history.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really cool. The one thing that just really stood out to me is being able to, see your dad growing up. I mean, I was lucky enough to have a guest on a few weeks back, Bryce Gilbo. He's the head football coach at Old Rochester High School. And he was able to coach with his dad. He coached under his dad and then eventually took over the program at Old Colony that his dad was the head coach. So I got to ask him this question, and I didn't think I'd be able to ask a lot of guests this question. So it's just nice that this opportunity pops back up. But, as a young man, I mean, talk about, you mentioned your senior year, like kind of going under the wings of your dad and learning a different aspect of the game of basketball. Talk about seeing your dad, right, at home and who he was, but also getting the best of both worlds and getting dad, the coach, young, motivating young men in a basketball program, and seeing how kids are very loyal to him. I mean, talk about growing up and seeing that. That must be really cool to see your dad in, kind of completely two different lights.
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. Growing up, I mean, he was always supportive. I mean, he's always been a family man. And his teams are built on that family atmosphere, and I've kind of taken that into mine, that we're a family. We do this together. But as a dad, he would get me into basketball camps. He would just be just a great dad. And we went to Disney many times as a family. And it was awesome to get that opportunity. And then my senior year, to get that opportunity to coach with him, which I wasn't expecting, because it was kind of just all of a sudden, just to really, and I saw him before coaching, obviously, but just to be a part of it and to see what goes on behind the scenes, and his practice preparation. Like you see it a little bit of it at home, but you see it more when I was with him. That my senior year, and that's where I learned, to be able to observe other teams and scout other teams. I got a lot done. So to see two sides, when he was yelling and all that other stuff at his kids, it was no different than what sometimes what he would do at home, But it was a different, it was a different way. Not that he yelled all the time, because he never did, at home, but just that when he's angry or upset, to see two sides, it's like, whoa, wait a second,
Yeah.
So but it was that, but that's his competitive instinct, and and that's the way that he's always coached, and he gets that respect from that, and it's just great to to do that. I mean, again, we were growing up, I mean, it was a great family just to be there. Me and my brother, he never really put any pressure on me to play basketball. Even though I played, because I did love the sport. I wasn't the best player either, but I played and I went hard. I worked hard. And then just to see him in that coaching aspect, he's like a father figure too for the boys, for those kids. So, there is a difference between, dad as dad and then dad as the coach. But it's the same mentality. And he wants the best for his kids. He wants the best for us as a family. And to see that translate, I mean, that's a big part of his success, and he knows how to get that out of everyone, including me and my brother and all that, and his kids. He gets the best out of everyone. He makes them believe, makes them. It's just like he's just blessed with that talent, with that gift, and that he just receives all that respect, and obviously he's got over 650 wins, at this point. So it definitely translates over.
Yeah, and it's just cool. I mean, at the end of the day, you got the best of the both worlds with him. And, we're going to talk about the success you've built, because you've built quite a successful program. And, we're going to break your program, or at least this interview, up kind of into 4 different parts of your coaching career. So, when I first started researching, there were so many things that popped up to me. But, I kind of broke down the last, I think it's 15 years. Or you want 15 or 16 years of your coaching career?
15. Yeah,
15 years. So, over the last 15 years, you've done a lot of incredible things in this run. And the one thing I want to talk about is right from the beginning, and year one, you took over this program at Hanover and you went 11-9, you made the playoffs. But just to read the stats here, I mean, so 11-9, 05, 06, 06, 07, you went 16-7, 07, 08, 15-5, 08, 09, 14-8. In 2009, 2010, you went 15-5. That's a 71-35 record. I mean, that's pretty impressive, Coach. You doubled the amount of wins than you had losses. So talk about that early success you had coming into the program. I mean, what did you kind of make it that was yours, and really kind of that first run that you had your first 5 years of coaching?
Well, the first couple of years when I was coaching, obviously it helps to have the players, and when I inherited the program and I took the program. I had some great players at that time. Leslie Gennard happened to be one. She was a sophomore. Jess Leroy. So I had like some really nice. I mean, that team. Brittany Sutton. I could reference my book in a few minutes, but that team was, that was a really good special team. And I think that first year we probably could have been better, but it was new to me. It was my first year as a coach, and it was new to the kids. So there's a new, it's like a changing of the guard. So it took a long time for that to get through. And all I really did that first year was I pushed the defense. I was positive. I brought the intensity. I wanted the kids to see, like, I put all this effort in, and I want the kids, wow, coach, puts all this effort in to get us prepared, to get us ready. We want to do that. And that was kind of what I wanted to instill on the kids that first year was, we can do this. We got to do it together. It's a learning curve, but we're going to, as long as we get better game by game, practice by practice, that's the mentality that I want them to do. So we were always trying to get better, but I was very intense, still am, you push them, you run, you do, all sorts of drills. You want the best out of them. My dad and most coaches, basketball coaches, preach defense. And that's kind of my MO is the defense. And as you kind of have in your notes, we'll talk about, points for and points against with our defense. And currently this year, the last couple of games, our defense has been really, really well. But that's one thing that I pride myself on. And and that's one thing the kids in the program, they know to expect that, okay, we're going to go and we are going to be a strong defensive team. He is going to push us defensively. And that's what I have. And then, so after that first year, things kind of settled down a little bit. And again, I had talent. And the first year was an adjustment for me. My assistant coach at the time was Dave Jacob. And I had kept him along because he knew the kids. I had been in Hanover the year before, and I knew some of the kids, but he knew them. He was a teacher in the school. He's the coach in the school, for volleyball. And so I kept him aboard. And then my freshman coach was another teacher in the school. She's been really good, but just to get that connection and to bring in that relationship, like, okay, tell me about this kid, what does this kid do, or what is that, and that was really important my first couple years, because I wanted to have some consistency still in the program, so it's not like something completely different. So the transition, it's not, there's a familiar face in there for the kids. And then after that first year, with the success that we had, we went down to Old Rochester, and we lost to Old Rochester, and Old Rochester was really good that year. We lost to them by about 9 points, but we battled and battled and battled. And it's a long ride down to Old Rochester, but the kids got a taste of something. They got a taste of it, and then they wanted more. And the younger class, they was like, this is great. And then next year we come out and we're just gelling together. I put summer leagues and fall leagues. The kids were just playing all the time, and that helps build the momentum going into that first couple years there. And again, I had the players, and I had some great coaches. And one of the things that I have always said, to me, is you're only as good as who's around you. And my assistant coaches have been unbelievable for me, and they make me who I am, as well as obviously I get some inside stuff from my dad too. I go to him all the time, but as a program, my coaches have been strong, and I love having that consistency right there. And then, as I said, I know I've said it many times, but it's the players. And in high school, it's funny because you go in stages, you go in rotation. So you could have 4 years where you're really good, and then for the next 3 years, you step back. I mean, it's just the way that it goes, whether you want that to happen or not. You're just, every high school team, unless you're like Braintree of, the past, or, Archbishop Williams of those, you're going to go through those seasons. But you just got to keep them positive, and you got to keep them focused and moving forward.
Yeah, and I find that's what's so amazing about that run is kind of what you said. Like you created identity, right? And that's defensively. And there's nothing like you said, getting a taste of the playoffs and these girls wanting more. They look back on that game and maybe you had a couple tough possessions or a couple calls that didn't go your way, and you're like, we were right there with this team. And for the girls, it builds that level of confidence. And it really kind of they look at you and they're like, this is the captain of our ship, and this is the direction that we're going. So I think that's awesome of building that tough mentality of we're going to be a tough draw or a tough team no matter what or who we play. And that's going to be our reputation throughout. And as you see, and we're going to talk in the numbers later, I mean, that's exactly kind of what you've built. But you mentioned something really great too, is you do have spurts and there are years in which you do struggle. So after that 5-year run, you had a couple of seasons that you were back-to-back 7-8 win seasons. And like you said, talent has something to do with it, but maybe as a coach, what did you learn the most about yourself, maybe struggling on those couple of years, and maybe something you changed about your approach a little bit that now catapulted you kind of into the second run that we'll talk about in a little bit?
So when you have those years, again, you want your kids just going hard. You want, you said reputation. We built that reputation that first 4 years. So even in those down years, when we were 8-12, or 7-13, and in those down years, teams knew, and we knew that you're coming into our place, or we're going in your place, and we're going to give you a battle. We're going to give it your all. We're not as talented as we were in the past, and then you're up and coming, but it's going to be a fight, and that was the reputation. Everyone knows that, oh boy, when you get into Hanover, you're going to be in for a fight. And that was, keeping those kids. The hardest part about those seasons is when you lose them, and just trying to keep them focused and trying to just be like, we've got to still get better, whether we make the tournament or not. Maybe we're not at that stage yet, but we've got to get better. If we can get better each game, if we can get better, in each practice, that's what we want. But we want to keep that reputation that we're going to give you a game regardless of what happens. So yeah, we were 7-13, but I'm sure there are teams in that 7-13 that are good teams that we battled, to 5-6 points. We hung around in the game, and I remember talking to coaches after those runs, like, oh man, you got your kids just work hard. Your kids work hard. Your kids are just they're just tough, and that that's important, and so when you have those losing seasons, it's again keeping the kids positive. Like that's when you're losing, things just don't go well, and especially if you lose 4 or 5 games in a row, kids are like, oh, but you got to be positive. You got to maintain that. Like you can show frustration as a coach, but you got to be positive. We're like, it's all right. Hey, what do we got 3 offensive fouls that game. Great. Let's build on that. So those are the things that, when you have those seasons, you do, and you just look for, getting better each time.
Yeah, and I love what you said because you also don't shy away from teams that you play non-league either. So you play in a tough league, that you've won 6 times, right? But with that being said, you've also had battles and you've been second place a bunch of times in that league too. So obviously there's competition there, and you're playing those teams minimum 2 games. And then you're not afraid to book opponents that are tough, that are up in division, and so on and so forth, which we'll talk about later. So like you said, that 7-13, 8-12 can be misconceiving if deceiving really if you're saying like, we lost 6 games by 7 or less points, even if you win half of those games, you're in a playoff. So yeah, absolutely. And so I always find that intriguing of what you learn about yourself a little bit, and you just kind of really trying to continue what you built in your program, even if you don't have the horses that you maybe had before.
Yeah, and sorry to cut you off,
No.
but and then you do the research. You keep thinking, okay, what am I gonna do? Where can I put this team in to get success? What are my strengths on this team? What are the strengths? We're defense has been our is what we hang our hats on all the time. But it's like, okay, where am I going to put them in a position to try to succeed, or to try to get better? So maybe I look at this play, or maybe we should go zone instead of man, or maybe depending on that. So as a coach, you have those seasons, and you really dig deep, you're like, all right, you know, and that makes you better because you get more of a knowledge of the game because you're trying to figure out what's going to be best for your team. So you're pulling in, you're watching film, you're watching, you know, whether you're watching the championship videos that they have on, you know, presses or man-to-man, and you want to instill that in there. So you get your work cut out, but it's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, that's the best part about the game, especially when you're coaching the game. It's just those little things that, you know, you want to get better at, that, you know, it can work. And to see that happen, it's great. And, you know, in some of those seasons too, you're playing younger kids. You know, you might have lost and graduated a big class, and you have a lot of kids that are inexperienced. So you're trying to also get them experience. And sometimes the best way we learn is not having success first, to figure out how we have to get there to have that success. So I think it's good for those girls, and, you know, build up your program. So you mentioned your styles defensively, and, you know, I'm guessing you kind of throw all sorts of defenses, and maybe sounds like a lot of press, but talk about your style on both sides of the ball. You can start with defense, but, you know, what are you defensively? And as a result of, if you are that press defense, in your face defense, how good is your transition offense off of turnovers or quick rebounds and getting up the court?
Yeah, so, you know, defensively, it's funny defensively because we try to cater your defense to depending on the team that is. Like this year, especially, you know, and we haven't pressed much. I didn't press much the last couple of years either, because I just thought our strength was not pressing. You know, our strength is getting back, playing half court, man-to-man defense. And so you make that adjustment. Now, when you have the horses to go full court, and you have the consistency kind of off the bench where you can throw kids in there, then you kind of change your style a little bit. You're like, all right, we can extend it. You know, in any game when you're down, obviously late, and you're still within the game, you're going to press a little bit to see if you can get any momentum going, or, you know, to kind of go things around. But like every day at practice, what we've been doing this year and we did last year is we work on the shell defensive drill. And you know, we're at the point right now this year, and I know I'm jumping ahead to this year, but this is kind of the way that it is every year, is with me and my assistant now. You know, the kids know the basics of the shell, and they've been up it, but we're talking about, you know, we're trying to iron it out. So like today we were talking about, you know, going over the screens, or we were talking about, when cutters come across the lane, instead of turning your back, just turn your head quickly or whatnot. So it's little things like that where you build on to start the slides, the help, where you're going to be. But now we're at the point where we're good at that. So now we can pay attention to the other details, you know, the more advanced details, and the kids understand that. So that's always been my philosophy in terms of defense. And again, it depends on the horses, you know, that I have. We have a very good defensive team this year. We had a very good defensive team last year. We're always, you know, pretty good defensively. But I just don't think that I have the right team to really press that much. But, you know, next year, you know, look further with some of the kids that we have coming back and some of the kids coming up, I think we can be a pressing team. So it varies from year to year. And offensively, you know, whatever's going to put the kids in the best position, you know, we're going to do that. You mentioned transition. We love to get out and transition. But a lot of times when we get in the transition, you know, we end up turning the ball over, and then you give up a possession. And that the turnovers are killer, because you're taking away a possession from your team, and you're giving the other team an extra possession. So, you know, if you have 20 turnovers, there's 20 possessions you just took away from your team. There's 20 chances that you missed to put the ball in, you know? So transition, we like to run transition. Sometimes we're not always best at it. But we also have some playmakers. You know, it's funny because I look at our offense, and for years we work on offense in practice, but we're never a good set offensive team. No matter how much I drill it, no matter how much we practice it, it's frustrating because it's like, just slow it down a little bit. And we're starting to get better this year with it. But so, you know, offensively, it's like, well, whatever. What are we going to do this year? No, we're going to get in transition and just let the kids go out and play. Because that's part of the game too, is these kids have been playing their whole lives. Let them play. instead of having to set up because that's what they want to do. Setting up an offense, you can create things, you can get someone open if you're having trouble getting kids open. But offensively, it's just what is the defense going to give us? How are we going to run it? How are we going to execute it? I mean, the bottom line, execution is the biggest thing. If you execute well, you're gonna be fine. So. It's kind of a balance, but it all depends on your team too.
Yeah, and it's so true. I mean, I come from the football world, so not marrying a way to play defense and offense and really adjusting your system to what your personnel is year to year. I'm glad to see that carries through a lot of different sports.
Mm-hmm.
And the hardest thing sometimes is just being who you are, because after you get scouted for so long, teams are going to be like, they're going to know what you do. They're going to know how you react to things and so on. And if you're not different and innovative and educating yourself, then you become pretty stale and very easy to prep for. And talking about the points in your offense and defense, I mean, I just happened to look up the 2015-2016 season. So, your points for, just to give the audience an idea here, was, I have 1,037 points for, 669 points against. And I feel like that's incredible. I mean, that's a great difference there between defense and offense. But realistically, that's probably a better stat than I'm giving it, because there were a lot of games that season that you were blowing teams out of the water. So you're emptying your bench out and playing a lot of different kids to give them that experience. Mm-hmm. So you're probably letting up a lot more points than you would if you had your starters in there. But you're also probably not scoring as many points as you would either if you had your starters in there the entire game. So I found that pretty intriguing about you. And when I look through the different years, I mean, it varies, but you're right around that 300 to 400 to 500 mark pretty much every single year of differential. And then you look at some of the big wins you had, mathematically you could figure it out and try to say, okay, maybe we average 20 points one way or the other each game and do it out and get an idea. But pretty amazing stuff to kind of see. So I was really curious in just how you stress that. So it's great to hear that, it's not a one thing fits all type mentality. It's kind of adjusting to who you are a little bit more, so on and so forth. So that's great.
Yeah.
One thing I've been curious about with you, or just coaches in general, that's had as much success for you. I mean, you've been to a lot of playoff, you made the playoffs a lot. Talk about your practice routine and schedule, say during like a regular season game when you might have like a back-to-back or, every other night, versus when you kind of get closer to playoff mode and those last couple of games, you're looking to really be playing strong going into the playoffs. I mean, is there a big difference in the way that you approach practice and you kind of approach everything versus regular season versus towards the end of your season?
Yeah, definitely. Because when you look at the beginning of the season, the regular season, and you're going to be good, like take that 15-16 year, we're good. This year, we're very good too. You're going to be good. And you're going to be there in the end. But it's getting to that point, setting them up, so they're going to succeed when they get to the playoffs, because it's a whole different ballgame. Records are 0-0 when you get into the playoffs. Teams are so much better. You go through a regular season schedule and you have some duds on your schedule. You mentioned that my non-league schedules are always tough, and because I always believe that if you want to get better, you got to play the best competition. You don't want to play teams that are consistently 3-17 every year, because you're not going to get anything out of it. It's the building blocks getting to that point. And then once you get to like, late January, February, it's like, if we don't know what we're doing right now, then we're screwed. Because then we have problems. You know what I mean? And it's like building up to that. So when it comes to the playoffs, the way that I approach practices is we have to worry about ourselves, but I can spend a little bit more time talking about our opponent and doing what our opponent does, because we should be good enough at what we've been doing all season. So, you look at like the Norwood, the game last year, and I know we'll get into it later on, but we were just 16 seed coming into number 1 seed Norwood, and the kids were focused. We watched film and I broke it down for them. I every year in the playoffs when we have a game, I will print out the scouting report on them. And I don't normally do that in the regular season. Sometimes I will if it's a big game. But for teams that we play in the play, I'll print out a scouting report for them and say, and I'll sit at practice, and go over it with them. During the regular season, I'll talk about, okay, you're going to match up with this kid. You're going to match up with this kid. This team, they do this really well. They do this really well. But the playoffs, it's really trying to get them just focused on, that last step and being the best that you can be at playoffs. And so it's a different mentality because you're doing the same things over and over again, but you're good at it. So when you get into the playoffs again, you can't resemble another team's tenacity or their hustle or what they do. You can't recreate that, but you can do the best you can to get them prepared. And that's the biggest thing with the in the playoffs. So the regular season's the build up. You take the time, you go through everything. By January, February, if we're not getting it, we're in trouble.
Right.
So.
And that's it, right? Because, I look in the world of football, especially when we're preparing for games. I mean, we're building things, say, like offensively, we're looking to be like, all right, if they're going to be in cover 2 against trips, this is what we're going to do until they adjust to it. Or, offensively, we notice that, teams send pressure up the middle. Like, there's certain things that you can definitely hone in on and so on and so forth to prepare for anybody. But the one thing you can't simulate in practice, and you kind of alluded to it, is speed. You can't simulate the other team's speed until you actually see it on the field, because even though your scout team might be running it to perfection and doing everything you ask them to do, they're just not doing it as quickly, they're not doing it as efficiently, and really your girls aren't going to see that until the game starts. So we're definitely going to jump into that, because to me that's one of more your impressive seasons of coaching, truthfully. Even though of all the great success you've had. So just kind of just like picking your brain here, let's talk about your bench a little bit. Like in football, again, and I just keep referring to that, but for the most part, you have 40, 45 kids on your roster where I was, and you have your starters, but you have your kids that defensively might play in certain packages and come out in certain times, and the same thing offensively if you go bigger or you try to get more speed on the field. Talk about utilizing your bench in the basketball world, where you are playing man-to-man defense. I mean, you got to be in pretty good shape, period. But, I'm sure playing man-to-man wears on you a lot. So talk about how you build your bench, and when you do the tryouts and you have your roster. I mean, how do you utilize it throughout the season?
So when it comes to the bench, there's obviously a lot of factors that go into it. Sometimes you have a strong bench, sometimes you don't have a very strong bench. There's a lot of times where I don't go to my bench that often, because those kids out there, they're in a groove, and I'm not going to touch them, unless I need to. They're in a groove. Like we had a game the other night, we played Pembroke, and I had a 5 in there. One kid, she was off the bench, and there was 4 starters in there, and we were in a groove, and I wasn't going to go away from that. But when you have to sub, you want to make sure that you put the kids in the right position, because you're going to need your best players in the end. They're going to need the break. They hate coming up. They don't want to come out. When you take them out, sometimes they give you this look like, why the hell are you taking me out? Like, I want to stay in there. I'm like, I know, I understand that, but you need a break, because I'm going to need you down in the end there. But it's, the kids in the bench, I tell them, because it's so hard in practice to get everyone through what you run on offense or what you do on defense, because there's just not enough time. So you spend more time with your starting 5, going over, this is how we're going to run, 41, or this is how we're going to run this 4 high play, and this is how we're going to run a 2-2-1 zone, or a press break. And sometimes you don't get the bench in there, but I want my bench to be paying attention in practice, and I want them to be a student of the game when they're on the bench, watching what they're doing. And my expectation is that everybody on the bench, even the starters, you need to know everybody's position up there. What is everybody doing? Because if so-and-so gets in foul trouble, okay, I might be looking to you because that's our best matchup. All right. And if it's a position that you're not comfortable playing, you should know what you have to do in that position. We can make adjustments as we go. But overall, it's just like putting the right kids in at the same time. And if you get that rotation, that's 6, 7, 8, 9, that's the rotation you want. Unfortunately in basketball, when you get to the 10, 11, 12, there's just not enough time to get everyone in every game, especially at the varsity level. because you're trying to win the game. And, so some of those kids just that might not get in it. It's not like football, or it's not like you have kids that may sit on the bench for a couple of games and they're just never going to get in there. But it's what they do at practice that pushes that first team or those other teams there, that what they're there for. Because with practice, kids could get sick, kids could get injured. You're going to need someone. So anytime they could step up. But when you go to your bench, you don't want to break up that consistency. If you put too many kids in, if you put 12 kids in every game, where's the consistency going to be? You're that first group of those kids that play the most, they're not good. They're out of sorts, because there's that consistency that's lost right there. Especially when they get into a groove, you don't want them to break that up. So it depends, foul trouble, or matchup wise, it might be something, we need some height, we need some rebounding in there. So I want to throw this person in there, or I need someone, better to handle the ball against this, or, to kind of take pressure off the guard. No, this person's going to go in. So it's a fine line, and I would love to get all the kids in every game, but unfortunately it doesn't happen that way. But you want the kids just to understand, just to know what their role is when they go into the game, if they go into the game. And that's a huge part of the success. The bench is a huge part of the success. When you have kids that are familiar with that role and understand the role that they're going to be in, that makes it for a better opportunity for them, but it makes it a better atmosphere as a team.
Yeah. And I mean, at the end of the day, you can't put everybody in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, you said, and I think it's just coaching and doing this podcast. You just learn that there's just so much thinking that goes into the game. And you just mentioned a bunch of different scenarios of who to just put one person in and take one person out and put this person in and take that person out. It's a constant chess game. So, there's also a lot of thinking that goes on in what you do, especially in basketball. We all know the last 2 minutes of basketball is really like 15 minutes of basketball,
Mm-hmm.
and no team's really out of it. So it's a matter of fouls and hitting your shots and, getting guys in the rebound or getting shooters in or whatever it is that you got to do. So there is a huge thought process that goes into that. And I think that that's, why you have the success you have. Just naming all those things. I mean, I'm not a basketball guy. I can watch a game like any average fan, but talk about setting plays and all that stuff. I'm not the person, right? But to hear how your mindset and your mentality is, that's great. And this leads us into your second run. So this is kind of part 3 of talking about,
Mm-hmm.
your coaching career. And this is pretty impressive. So I'm going to take a minute and really read this stuff out so our audience can kind of hear this. So from 2013 to 2017, you were 73-14, including 4 consecutive Patriot League championships. Those back 2 years, you actually were undefeated in the Patriot League. Also included a 2015-2016 season that you went undefeated regular season, which is something we're going to dive into because I just think that's amazing to pick your brain about. Back-to-back D3 semifinals, and you mentioned some of those tough teams, especially those Archbishop Williams. I know from being an Catholic guy, yep, you play some of those teams, and
Yeah.
I get it. And in that process, you also produced 3 Division I college basketball players, which
Mm-hmm.
I find just unbelievable. Of having 1 in your program is amazing to have a kid that goes to that level, but having 3 within a 4-year run, I think is even more impressive. So we're going to dissect into this. And the first thing I want to really sink my teeth into is the undefeated season. I've never got to really talk to a coach like this, and I can imagine myself in the football world. I've been there a few times as an assistant that we've gone deep into a season, 8-0, 9-0, 10-0. So I understand a lot that goes into that. But talk about the first moment of that season that you were kind of like, this is a possibility. I mean, this is a real thing that we could run the table and go undefeated here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a challenge. It's great. That season was a fun season just in general. But when you get to that, 15, you're 15-0, all of a sudden it's like the walls are starting to close in on you, because now the pressure's starting to build, not only on you as a coach, but on the kids. And because they're like you said, we could do this. We can go undefeated. The teams that we have coming up, we can beat these teams because we've already beat them. You look at your schedule or where it goes, but yeah, it's just the pressure just builds and builds and builds. And that season, I mean, we were loaded. Megan Dixon, Haley Ward. Well, that's one of she went to Drexel. Megan Rabb, went to Air Force. And Stephanie Flynn was the other one. She was a Columbia. But that year just was. I mean, it was. I didn't know if we could do it or not. Towards the end, we played some tough teams. So the regular season, Patriot League, we came down to Hingham, to go 18-0, and that was a big one because Hingham was really good. They, Haley Blassetti, they had some really, really good players. So with the others, it was just. Oh, it was just so intense. It was really intense. You play the other side only once, and we're looking at the schedule and we're saying, we still got Hingham on the schedule. We still got Hingham. We got to go to Hingham, to finish the regular season. And we played well, and that game, 18-0, that was the end of like the league season. And as time went on, that fourth quarter, and we had a pretty good lead, and it was a great game. The kids were starting to get excited, and it was like, once we won, it was, all hell broke loose. Everyone was super excited. But then we had two really tough games because we were in the Foxborough Warrior Classic that year, and Foxborough always is, a powerhouse. So going into that, we end up playing Foxborough, the championship game. Let me say, I'm trying to go through, see if I can find my book here of that season. Sorry, I'm looking away here.
No, please. And as you're doing that, I mean, that's what's so amazing is like at the high school level, I mean, keeping your emotions tight, like so the girls don't necessarily kind of see what's maybe running through your mind or the nerves that are kicking in, but obviously for them too, because everyone's talking about it in school. I'm sure it's getting a lot of PR in town. The kids are, all the sports are talking about it. Everyone's coming to the games. I'm sure the gym was rocking, especially towards the end of that season when you guys were making that run. So just to kind of juggle all that and manage that, at the high school level and it's not easy. It's not easy. So, you having that, and having that ability to, run a regular 20-0 season and putting that under your belt. I mean, I read the article when you guys went 20-0 and that was a tough game. I think you guys were down at halftime.
Yep.
So I'm sure those last couple of games, it was sinking into the girls a little bit too, the pressures of it, like you said, kind of caving in. But yeah, Coach, I just thought it was absolutely amazing to see you go on such a great run. And I know maybe the season didn't necessarily end the way that you were all hoping to finish it off. But to have that under your belt and to do something like that at the high school level, Coach,
yeah,
you deserve all the credit in the world.
Thanks. Yeah, it was awesome. I'm looking back, so I kind of had it wrong. So we had before we played Hingham, we had the Foxborough tournament because Hingham, I remember, was the 20-0, and that was where the celebration was. I think that might have been because that was over the vacation. But we had played, so we beat Plymouth North. That last before we went into the Foxborough tournament, and we opened up the Foxborough tournament with Lincoln Sudbury. Again, another really strong school
in everything.
And we end up beating them. What was it? They weren't as good that year because I think we crushed them. But I was worried about it. But they're traditionally really good. I think I'm looking at the book here. Yeah, what was it? No, that was a good. So hold on, it was 76-45. 76-45. It was that, and they were again that they were pretty good. And then we go to play Foxborough, and that one was a classic. 52-45 was the final, so that gets us to 19-0. So you beat a good, strong Lincoln Sudbury team, then you beat a really legit Foxborough team. Then we go to Hingham. Was also really good. And then, that was when the pressure started, like, okay, here it is. We're at this big game, 20-0. Let's do it. Let's get this going. And the pressure and all that, it was just crazy. And then end up winning that game. And, then we go on and we played, Middleborough that year, and Middleborough made it in this was the Sullivan rule, but they had only won 3 games. We already beat them twice in the regular season. Then we played Abington, and they had Jenny Warden. I mean, she was a great player. Abington was really good. And then we ran into Coyle, who was good. And we could have won that. We had a chance to win that game. And we just didn't make the plays that we needed to. But that whole season though was just a memorable season. And again, they all kind of blend together. And I remember that. And I knew those, I just couldn't remember the order that those games came in.
Yeah, like you said, after a while you coach so many of them that things and names get all bumped, and you're like, wait, this kid played that year. I trust me, I did it so much. And like I said, it's just a huge accomplishment. But you should really pat yourself on the back for that, because there's not a lot of high school coaches in any sport that say that they went through an undefeated season, especially the winter. You're playing 20 games, that's a lot of games. And for high school kids, to be perfect for that period of time that's not easy. And it's not easy. And you might have not been perfect and made mistakes in games, and some you can probably remember things, but at the end of the day, in the win-loss record, you were perfect. And I think that's amazing that you were able to right that ship. And obviously you had great talent that you mentioned, and we'll jump into some of these girls in a few minutes. But another thing that I kind of just have in my notes here is 2016, 2017, the very next year. I'm just going to read. I believe you went 19-3. I could be a little off. Maybe that doesn't make sense, but with a couple playoff games, I think it was 19-3. But you played, again, another undefeated Patriot League season. But your non-league, you played Brockton, which was a D1 team. You played them and beat them twice. The team that you lost to was Bishop Fien, who you lost to twice. And they're a Division I. I think they won the Division I title that year. So
I believe they did, yes.
Yeah, you're not playing, some of those softer teams that you could have to pat your stats. The next year you came out, locked and loaded and ready to go. So talk about the mentality of kind of booking a schedule like that, maybe knowing the team that you had coming back from the year before.
Yeah, so a lot of it did have to do with the team that I had the year before, and I wanted to build on the success of that 22-0 season, or 22-1 season. And the good part about that, having at that point in time, you had these kids coming back, so I knew the following year, we're going to be good. And my thought was, I'm going to play the best, because I know what it's going to come down to. It's going to come down to either Archbishop Williams, or it's going to come down to Coyle, because it always does, one of those. And I want to give our kids put our kids in the right position, so when it gets to that point, we're familiar playing with like that talent. And Bishop Fien is the for years, and they still are, it's just that is a good school. And I knew Mike very well, and he wanted to play me and I wanted to play him. Thought it was just a great opportunity for the kids to play. And then I went out to get Brockton as well. And Brockton was, pretty good. They weren't as great as, some of their teams have been, but still it's D1, it's Brockton, there's something about playing at Brockton High School. It just, I have memories of my dad, coaching there, in his time, and just, there's so many memories. But just Brockton High School is like a mecca, playoff basketball. So it was cool to be able to get a chance to play there too. But again, I knew the teams that I wanted, and I wanted to play the best, because that's what my kids, they really needed us to play, to play the best, to put them in that position. So that was a great season too. Again, we end up falling short. I think that year was we lost to Archbishop Williams, but we had them for a while too. They had Asia Dingle that year, and she had gone on, I forget what school, but she's Division I player. That kid was just amazing, and we did a really good job defending her too. Like, we kind of held her in check for most of the game, but they had just so many other pieces that we just kind of we kind of do it. And some of my kids, we didn't play as well. Some of my big kids didn't have great games, but that's all part of it. It all comes to that. But that was a good follow-up season. I wish we had kind of gotten further, but that's why I went out to get that schedule, because I'm like, I know we have a chance to beat Archbishop Williams or Coyle Cassidy, because it's the same team that I had last year. They have the experience. And so, back-to-back years, we get there. It didn't work out for us, but still, it was, we went through the gambit for sure, to get ready for that moment.
Yeah, and I mean, first, who knows what was in the water those years in Braintree? Because between Braintree girls and Archbishop William girls and I mean, the two schools in Braintree that was just so dominant in basketball
Yeah.
for a long period of time. So there's got to be something in the water there. But yeah, and I found that amazing. And then obviously off of that, so again, 74-13. I mean, that's incredible, coach. I mean, you're averaging maybe 3 losses a season that year.
Hmm.
And then we're talking about the schedule you're playing. So you're losing games to good quality teams. You're not losing games that you shouldn't. Maybe you look back and a few of those, maybe you think you shouldn't have lost. But, for the most part, you're averaging 3 losses a season, which means you're averaging about 17 wins a season during that period too, which is it's
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Crazy.
It's awesome. I mean, it's a testament to you and how great of a coach you are. But, during that run, there were 3 girls that we talked about that were Division I athletes, and you kind of named them. But I want you to talk about these girls. Again, Megan Rabb went to Air Force. Haley Wardell went to Drexel. Stephanie Flynn went to Columbia. I mean, talk about, well, first of all, just the type of girls that they are, but also the impact that they have on young girls in the community. I mean, I guess I'm just going to kind of ask a accumulating question. Talk about these girls a little bit, and also maybe the effect that they did have on your program, especially in the youth levels. I mean, 3 girls, Division I products. I mean, your youth, all the girls in town must have been running to play basketball during that second run a little bit. So talk about how that's just kind of helped your program all the way across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was another kid that she didn't go to Division I. She ended up actually playing at UMass Boston, and she had a very good career at UMass Boston, Megan Dixon. She was a great player. Just they all were special, in their own way. Stephanie was the first, was the first one. She was my second 1,000-point scorer. Kelly Duvall back in 2010. She didn't play in college. She was more of a softball player. She had a great career. She had 1,000 points in 2010. So in 2000, let me see if I get this right. And Stephanie Flynn was 2016, and so was Haley Wardwell 2016. So I had 2,000-point scorers that year. And top that off with Megan Rabb, I still had, and also actually was Stephanie. I don't know, was Flynn. And she wasn't in 16, I don't think. She was 15. So yeah, 15 was Stephanie Flynn. But regardless, I think was it? Yeah, because that was Haley's senior year, I believe. And Haley came for us. Haley actually came to us from Cardinal Spellman. She played at Cardinal Spellman. She was
read
a
that.
person.
Yeah.
Yep. She came from us from Cardinal Spellman. And she's, again, those kids, they just lived and breathed and ate basketball. It was in their blood. It was, Stephanie Flynn comes from a long line of Flynn. She was the first one that I've had. And currently right now I have 2 more of the Flynns. One's a senior this year, and the last, I think this is the last one. She's a freshman. So I've had, a nice run with the Flynns. And there was another sister in there too. But Stephanie was just more, she was she was such a competitor. She was a fierce competitor. She just has that look and that tenacity it was just so awesome. And she would do some amazing, amazing things. So the little kids, see her and they're like, wow, I want to be like Stephanie Flynn and this and that. Of course they're watching Stephanie Flynn, and then you get, Dixon, shooting threes deep, Haley Wardwell shooting threes deep, Megan Rabb's just, killing it on the boards, killing it underneath. They're all, Haley and Megan were really good shooters, like pure shooters, but they could do so many other things with a basketball that just made them that special. And then, Stephanie, she could shoot, she could go inside, she could shoot outside, she could defend well, she rebounds well. And, Rab, obviously she was like 6'2", and she's just like a stud underneath. Just couldn't move her, and, rebounding. And it was such a great run, and not too often, especially at public schools, do you get like classes like that where you have 3 or 4 kids that are legit players, like I said, D1 players. It's very rare to see public schools to see that. So to see that, not only for the kids in the town but all over, it just wow, like I want to be like them, I want to play like them. Or it just was really, really, really special. And I was the benefactor of it. It makes my job easy when I have those kids on my team. Like, here's a ball, go out and play. I don't have to do anything. They know how to do it themselves. So, it was a luxury just to coach them. But again, but they established their legacy. And again, they're part of this legacy that you're going to go into Hanover, you're going to get some good players. There might not be so many good, but they're going to work their tails off. And there's always going to be one player that's going to be a thorn in your side that, from that team that's just going to, do it. And that year there was obviously a couple, but yeah, it was awesome. Those couple of years.
Yeah. And so how involved are you with the youth programs? I mean, especially, give yourself credit, coach. Those girls might've been talented. Absolutely. And it sounds like they were, they were so, but you're putting them in a position to win, and they're going through a program to not only make themselves better, make their teammates better. And you've seen it through these runs of how well you guys played. How involved are you with the youth programs, and especially in town
it's interesting that, because I would love to be more involved than I am, because I have not really been involved. I mean, I've tried, to get things, and sometimes it's just not interest. But I've had some, coaches or some parents of some kids who have kind of given me inside scoop of some of these kids. When Dixon and Rabb and Wardwell were 8th grade, 7th and 8th grade, I would go to their youth games just to watch them, just to be a presence and so forth. And so, I want to work more with it, but it's hard. Number one,
again, it's a lot of time.
Yeah, it's a lot of time. And the times that I did try it, and maybe it wasn't promoted well, but, I just couldn't get, a lot of interest. So it was hard. So I'm relying on, my youth coaches, who some of them I have a very, pretty good relationship with, that they've told me, this group is great. This group is great. And I know with them that they're actually teaching them the game at that level. So it's like, great. But I think, the product, right now, the product that we put on the floor, not, season in, season out, speaks volumes for the youth. Like, I want to play in that program because all that program does is win. They work hard, and I want to be a part of that. So I do think, from that sense, the program speaks for itself. But Hanover is just a great town. Hanover is a very athletic town. The sports in Hanover are, for years, any sport has just been, unbelievable. The boys basketball won the state championship a couple of years ago. Rugby. It just, soccer is always around. They're just great athletes, great families, great people there. And again, it's word of mouth. People want to, come out, and they want to see Hanover, and the kids. More and more what I like to do, and my AD, Scott Hutchinson, he does a really good job of getting the youth kids, not this year with COVID, but getting the youth kids, to come and maybe play a game at halftime, so they're there, and awesome. When they're there, I love it, and the kids love it, because in a normal season, we'll come out of our locker room, and the youth, like the 6th grade or 7th grade, they're all lined up as we come out, cheering us on, and giving everybody 5.
So cool, yeah,
cool. It's wicked cool, and when they do the lineups and saying, the kids, they're there, and everyone's giving them 5, and then when we get in the game, they're sitting right behind us, they're cheering, they're screaming, and they see that, and that's just awesome. Like, I love it when my youth, when Hutch gets the youth kids there, when the youth kids get a chance to play at halftime, because they just give so much support. And the girls, my team, they love it. They love it. And a lot of my kids too, they're active, they ref, town league, or some of them, I've had some of the kids that coach in the town league, as part of community service, or just do it just to love it. So they see these kids too, as coaches or officials, they see them, on a Saturday, so-and-so's reffing our game today. I see them all the time, and then they're talking to them, and it's just awesome. So I think, with the kids that I've had, that I've been blessed to have, with some of the parents in the youth, some of the coaches in the youth, and just the support we get from the entire community and Hanover itself, that speaks a lot for the program. But as I said, I do wish I could be a little bit more active, with the youth. I have a 5-year-old too, so that's kind of, my wife, she works full time, so it's kind of hard in the summertime to be able to work, to take the time out to work with them. And even in the, when they're traveling, hard to go watch them travel, or, I'd love to go to an AAU game to watch them play AAU or something, just to be vision, just be some people they can see me and they knew who I am
Exactly.
and so forth. So I would love to do that more. I do have an assistant coach with me. He's been with me for the last 2 years, and he actually coached at North Quincy High School for a couple of years. I coached against him. He's a resident of the town. He's got 3 daughters, and he coaches the fourth grade, I think, fourth and fifth grade teams. So it's nice to have him with me the last 2 years because of those younger kids. He's going out there and working with them, and he knows what. And he coached against me, and now he's with me and we have a great time. So he knows what I expect. He knows where we're going and he wants to get the kids going. And we were talking about the other day on the bus that we'd really like to do something. Him and I would like to do something in the off season, to really get after it. And having him in the youth,
Already
and coaching with me, I think I'd be able to get more and more of an interest because I'll get a lot from him, because he's all in for it. And his name Mike Jorgensen, it is. But it's again, if there's one fault that I think that I would say for me is not being as active with the youth as I would like to be.
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, like you said, you mentioned all those factors. I mean, I'm a dad of 2 twins. Like, it's hard with babies in general, just scheduling wise, and your wife working and you working. It's not easy, And so what you're doing is working. And I think just having a coach that's there, that's even if they're at that fifth grade, level, they know what's coming, they know what to expect, and they see that talent, especially when they go up in 7th and 8th grade. And you kind of know to keep your eye on it. Sometimes it's all you really need, in a lot of senses too, because you don't want to overwork these girls at the youth age. You don't want a lot of these parents maybe volunteering the coach because they need a coach for the team, and they know the basics of basketball, and maybe that's it, and so you don't know sometimes what you have down there either, and you get lucky and have a good coach that really knows the game, or someone that works with you and knows your terminology, and he can fool around with that a little bit and see, okay, what can these girls do at such a young age level. It's cool, but I get it. It's a lot of work. It's not easy. And this is why I do this podcast. There's so much you do that no one talks about except what's your win-loss record? That's it. The only thing they ask you about. So it's crazy, but I'm going to jump into this last portion of it. And I mentioned I kind of broke it up into 4 parts. To me, outside of maybe your undefeated regular season, the most impressive year of coaching for you, I felt doing research, was last year. Now, last year you made the playoffs at 11-9, but you started the year off 3-8. And you did lose a lot of close games from the articles that I was reading. So you were a team that was competitive, which you kind of talked about earlier in the podcast of what you wanted your identity to be when you took the program over. You then went on to have a 8-1 run, 9-1 run, 8-1 run, and make the playoffs. And as a 16 seed, you draw the 1 seed, Norwood. So I'm sure from Norwood's end, they're like, gulp, number 1 seed playing 16, and they're facing a feisty team that for the past 4 years before that has been one of the more dominant programs in girls high school basketball. So that's not an easy draw for them, but you guys were in a battle. I know you lost a close game, and even maybe the score wasn't, accurate to what the game really was down till the end. But I thought that was your most impressive season of coaching. I mean, talk about the tale of 2 seasons really for you last year.
Yeah, it really was. Last year, with the last couple of years prior to this year, we've started off, very slow, and we always finish strong, and I think, again, because we build things up and then we finish strong. But last year was just it was a lot different. We started off, early on, and we played Pembroke. That was our first game last year, and they were really good. I mean, they were, defending D2 South, finalists. So we opened up with them. They had Kate Galligan, and they just were kind of a solid team. So we got, our butts whipped that first game, 60-30. I think it was 60-35 or something like that. And so, that was kind of like a frustrating way to go into the season. And then, early on, then we start, then we played Duxbury, our next game. We beat them, pretty well. Then we played North Quincy. We beat them. And then we get to Hingham. And Hingham, again, they have the kids, Grace Bennis, you have, the Blassetti girls. So they were the between Pembroke and Hingham, they've been around in D2 in the South, and Pembroke and Hingham played in the South sectional the year before. And we had Hingham, and we end up losing to them by 1. And, that was, or is that actually, no, that wasn't that. That was another year. But Hingham, this was in the Rockland tournament and during Christmas vacation, and we played them so well, and we had many chances to win. In fact, we probably should have won that game. And then we played Stoughton, the next, and Stoughton's not that good, and we did not play well. We were not that good, so that was a killer, that Stoughton game. But after that point, with Silver Lake, we lost a close one with Silver Lake. But things started clicking after that point. I think the kids were frustrated, but because they knew that we're there, like that we're just on the cusp of becoming a good team, and so they believed in themselves, and again, being in some of these, going to taking Hingham, losing them by a point, Silver Lake, we were a better team, but we lost to them, and we had our chances, then we go up to the Quincy, whatnot, but they started believing in themselves, and like, wow, we can do this, and I just kept on being positive with them. Like, look, we still have it. We still can win the league. We still can do this. We can still get to the playoffs. This is what we're looking for. And I think they took that mentality, going into the season, and then it, comes down to, East Bridgewater at the end of the season, which they were a very good team back then. And we beat them, which was great. That was a nice win. It was on a Saturday or a Sunday. I forget what it was, but it was in an afternoon game. And we knew at that point too, we're like, yes, we can do this. And we finished 11 and 9. Yeah. Once we beat Scituate at Scituate, which was a great game too. We knew that we were in, and then it was sitting back waiting, okay, we're going to be the 16th seed. We're going to be playing, the number 1 team or whatever. But the kids the kids believed in themselves, and we watched film on Norwood, that we had, the kids even on their own, said, oh, because, we watched, some of it was on YouTube and the kids were watching it. We gave out, prep sheet for it and said, this is what we want to do. This is what we want to do. And the kids saw it too. Like, okay, we're just going to pack in the defense, let them kind of beat us from the outside. That's what we want to do. Their best players are inside. We're just going to, take it to them as best as we possibly can. So we go into Norwood and we execute the game plan perfectly. The kids believe in themselves. We started off, we were down early, but then we went on a run, towards the end of the first quarter and into half. I think we outscored them like 22-3 going into half. So we had a lead at halftime, and then getting into the third quarter, we still started playing very well, and we would go to the line and we missed a lot of our free throws. And that kind of came back hurt us at the end because we had chances to extend the lead, but we weren't doing it from the free throw line. And they started shooting. They started hitting the ball.
Kept a good team in the game for too long.
Yeah, exactly. And then, it was right down to the wire, and we had a chance to beat them, at the end of regulation, but we didn't. We ended up going into overtime, and then, at that point, we put just so much effort into it, and we're excited. They believe that they could do it, but again, it's Norwood, and they just, they're just too good. And the better team, they were obviously the better team, won out in the end, but we had our chances. But the biggest thing going into that game is just, I was so proud of the kids, the way that they responded, the way that they came out. And it could have been Norwood took us a little lightly, but I remember talking to Kristen McDonald, after she's the guidance counselor, and she was the Braintree coach. She now coaches at Norwood Boys. And I talked to her after, and she was like, oh, I told coach, I said, this is Hanover. This is not going to be an easy game, and they're very well coached. And he's like, I was right, but it was all the kids. The kids just executed the game plan to a perfection. And it's just, we missed some free throws here, missed some shots here and there. We didn't get a couple bounces, and there you go, But It was a great way to end the season, because even though we lost, it was a positive end to the season.
Yeah, and I think too, looking at that, it obviously is a positive end. You went on a great run. I mean, you played the number one seed really to the wire. So your girls are obviously pretty, juiced up after the season and be like getting to work for the next season. And then, the worldwide pandemic hits everybody,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So, I'm sure you've been asked a million times how you're navigating through this and how you're doing this, but I'll ask you this, and I'll ask it a little differently. Talk about the COVID rules that are in place for basketball. Like, I saw a picture the other day of free throws, and everyone's like standing basically away, and the person's at the line by themselves like they're shooting a tee. Talk about maybe how you've had to coach a little differently during COVID time because of some of the rule changes that are in the game.
Yeah, it's not only the rule changes too. It's with the close contacts and anything like that. Trying to keep up to date. We had a pause over Christmas vacation, so we were we couldn't play our first game over Christmas vacation, and then we got back. And then over New Year's that weekend, we had there was a kid that was, practice. She had a, positive case. So then we were out for a couple of days till we all got tested and, they, looked on all that. And that's the thing, you look at teams. I look at like a team like Situate, we play them tomorrow night, but they've been on a 3-week pause. They came back Friday. They played their second game of the season. But that's the hardest thing because you don't know. That's one of the hardest because you don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next. The other week we played Duxbury. Now they weren't on our schedule, but because Situate was out, we had to find another game. So we were going to play Hingham. And because Hingham couldn't play Plymouth North because Plymouth North was out. But then Plymouth North came back, and so Hingham went back to play Plymouth North, and then we end up with Duxbury. So it's, to prepare for that, and that was only the one instance. To prepare for that, like, is really, really
tough. It's
tough.
A 3-ring circus, it sounds like.
Yeah, and it's, you just don't know. You don't know when the pause is going to come, and you don't know whether it's your team or someone else, another team or whatnot. So it's kind of hard. I look in my book and I'm like, okay, this is who we're playing on these days, but that could change. That could completely change depending on COVID. But getting into the rules, honestly, other than a couple of things here and there, it's really the same game. There's no jump ball. So it's a coin toss. I like to joke with the kids, when they go, there, I'm like, okay, do we win the coin toss? Like in football, whatever. They think it's funny. Like, okay, we defer to the second half. All right, that's fine, Yeah, but it's just one of those. That's a little bit of a change, but that's not that big of a change. No out of bounds underneath. That's probably the biggest one. Like, especially if it's underneath their basket, like on the offensive basket, if it's going the other way, it's not a big deal. But because you can't run any out of bounds plays underneath the basket, and so everything is side out of bounds. So I've put a little bit more effort into side out of bounds plays than I have in the past because, well, I want to get it in or to try to be successful with it. I mean, the biggest thing with any out of bounds play is just get the damn ball in.
Right, get it in.
First of all,
right.
Whether you score or not, great, but get the ball in so you don't turn it over. But that's a change. The free throws, it is a little bit different. If it's 2 free throws, kids can't be in there for the first free throw. They've got to stay back, but the second one they can go in. If it's a 1-on-1 or if it's a 3-point play, they can go in. Same thing with a 3-point shot. You get fouled on a 3-point shot, you can't be in for the first 2, but you have to be in for the third. That is not terrible. I think that gives obviously the defensive team an advantage. Although one night was our first night, Quincy, we play up in Quincy, we had the advantage. Quincy rebounded their own miss off a free throw. We didn't get it, and fortunately they didn't score, but I'm like, yeah, I mean, come on now,
Yeah.
But that's kind of an adjustment, but you still can play defense. There's no closely guarded. I was
wondering that with man-to-man, like, is there like you can't press? Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can still press, you can still do whatever you want to do in the whole scheme of things. So it's really, the game really hasn't changed. I mean, I think timeouts are a little bit different because they're 2.5 minutes now. And sometimes I'm like, which is good because I get to talk to my assistant coaches and be like, all right, what should we do here? Or what kind of adjustments could I make? But that's kind of a long break, no halftime, 2 minutes in between quarters. So those kind of like little minor details. I mean, the other night we played a game when we played Quincy. We started at 6:30. The game was over by like 7:25, and that's like, wow, I'm going to go home early, or whatnot. But then the masks, the mask, and I know it's like every sport, soccer did the same thing. The masks are tough. The kids have adjusted very well to it. There are times though the kids do have the mask, just with their nose showing or whatnot, and you got to kind of keep reminding them. The officials kind of remind them. The officials don't blow whistles now either, so they have these little Fox 40, buttons that they press, and some of them aren't really that great. The Fox 40, but the Fox 40 could do a little bit better with the whistles, but that's another story. Even the officials say that too. Like, and I'm sorry, we're so used to blowing it and putting our hand up, so sometimes. That's kind of an adjustment too, but really the COVID rules just I don't think have really significantly impacted the game. It's still the same game with just a couple minor changes, and again, the playing with a mask, I think that's probably the hardest thing, practicing with a mask, coaching with a mask is hard to do too. But I don't think the COVID rules as much have affected us as the pauses for teams and all that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I had on Matt Freeman last week, the head girls basketball coach at Braintree, who took over, and he's like, yeah, my first 4 games I had to play Newton North. I mean, they're 7th in the state, and I had them back to back games because of kind of what you alluded to with your schedule a little bit in school. So it also works against you in a lot of ways too, in that sense, depending on who you draw. But as we kind of near the end of this show, I just like to ask my coaches, a couple questions as far as just advice down the road. So one is, what's your advice to young coaches out there that, have been doing it for a little bit and maybe looking to make that jump into, the interview process of trying to take over a program and start at their own? I mean, what's the advice you give someone who's about to make that climb?
Trust yourself, really. Because, it's like, it's basically, you're a good coach. You know what you're doing. But that being said, look to get better too. What can you do, to make you a better coach? One of the things, for me, depending on the team you have, trying to find an identity on your team. And that's a challenge from year to year. And sometimes that can be overwhelming because there's so much out there that you can do. And you might be at a loss, like, oh, I don't know, is this going to work for me, or is it, is this? Just go with the flow, see how it works. You can always make adjustments, further on, but stick with your guns, stick with what you do, but always be a student of the game too. Learn, watch films, whether not just game films of other teams, but, watch films that break down drills or that break down plays, from like college coaches, maybe watch a college game. The NBA, it's kind of hard to, as a high school coach, so because there's a lot of, things different. It's like, don't really go by the NBA. It's great to watch, but focus more on like the college or high school, what other high school coaches do. And understand this, that especially at the high school level, it goes in cycles. You're going to have some good years, but you're also going to have some really down years. And that, you just got to, it makes you a stronger person, makes you a stronger coach. You need those years because it really makes you who you are and where you want to go. We all want to win. We all want to have those great teams, but it's just in high school basketball, it doesn't. And I would probably say like the last thing is, in terms of what advice is, in terms of your program, you have 4 years with the kids in your current program. And so when they graduate, but you're coming back no matter what. So you always want to look to the future. You want to try to, what you build for the future, build with what you have, but you're also putting in things for the future for your underclassmen as they come through, to kind of put them in the right position. You got to take a look at, it's about that year, but you're also trying to build a program because when those kids go, you're still there, and you're trying to build your program. So I think that's one of the biggest, one of the best pieces of advice that I got was you're going to be there longer than the kids. what do you want out of your program, and build your program to what you want. And it's not going to happen overnight. I mean, Rome wasn't built in a day. It's just going to take time. But if you have the time and the commitment to do it, you're going to be fine.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. You got to look at it and say to yourself that I remember even just being an assistant coach and I coached defensive backs. I always looked at it as every year I want to be able to have one or two guys come back that have pretty good significant playing time, that have experience. So I'm never looking to find 4 new people the following year with very little experience. I have guys who've gotten a lot of good rotations in and might have 5 or 6 guys that getting their feet wet's really important, especially as you're trying to build the future of that position or their program or whatever it is. That's great. The last thing I ask is just, sacrifice. I mean, what you do, it takes a lot of time. And this is, again, part of the reason why I started this podcast is because there is so much time spent on your season outside of your season, and not in the hours that you're paid to coach this, but it goes further with your education and, you scouting, or you go in the clinics, or you go in the college practices and trying to learn and educate yourself the best you can. That comes sacrifice with home life and social life, and maybe getting, you have a young daughter, and maybe that sometimes you should sacrifice a little bit of time that you spend at home with her because you're doing the things for your job. I mean, talk about sacrifices and how you're able to balance that off as much as you do.
Yeah, I mean, most people are probably in the same way that have a family. I mean, obviously, family comes first, and that's the most important thing. So you make sacrifices that way. If you have to miss a clinic or you have to miss something, because your family is in a situation, then obviously you got to tend to that. I mean, your family is your life. Your family is your, this is, in the grand scheme of things, this is just a job. It's a job that you love to do. But your family is the most important thing. Family always comes first, religion, family, whatever your belief system is. But to me, it's always your family. And I treat my kids the same way. We're all a family here. We're not individual. We're all a family. But there are sacrifices that you have to do. There are times, especially, being a basketball coach, and even for the kids themselves, we give up 2 vacations. February vacation, especially at the varsity level, February vacation and Christmas vacation, because you're typically, with Christmas vacation, the season's just kind of starting. There's Christmas tournaments or there's games over that vacation, so you're giving up that vacation time. You want to spend time with your family for Christmas or New Year's and all that, but you got 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day, or however long practice, where you have to go to practice. You have to be prepared. You have to have a schedule. You need to prepare for the next team, whether you're watching a film Christmas night, after everyone's kind of gone to bed or kind of things settled down. I mean, you got to keep on going, but you do miss that. You do miss that family time. I mean, I haven't skied in like 5 or 6 years. We want to start to take our daughter skiing, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do that in the next couple of weeks or whatnot. But that's something that you want to do. A lot of you hear, I'll go to skiing this weekend, or I'm going to do that. It's a tall burden, and especially when, your wife works, full time, you got to find, thank God for my in-laws and my parents. They're there, to help out. And, whenever they need to be. So it's a big sacrifice. It's a huge, because you're constantly doing things. Even when you are home with them, when you're spending time with them, you're like, I got to watch this film on this next team, or I got to study my notes. I got to look over what happened here. Because you have to get the kids ready. You don't want to go into a practice not prepared, because the kids will see that. And when the kids see that, then they're like, well, he doesn't care, so why should we care? And you don't want to get into that situation. So there's a lot of sacrifices with it, but they're good sacrifices. As long as you keep that idea that, family is the most important thing, and your family accepts it, with what you do, then you're going to be all right. You're going to make it, but it is a big sacrifice, because, I mean, I would love to, do some more, like 2 vacations, you obviously with COVID, you can't do that, but, go away for February vacation, or go away for, for Christmas or whatever. February vacation comes as a varsity coach. this, postseason tournaments. So you're going to those tournaments, you're watching other games. February vacation, I'm driving all over, southern Massachusetts going to scout a game. I went down to North Attleboro last year, and next year with the new alignment, heck, I could have to go all the way out, west to watch a game play, with, having the 4 divisions. And that's a big sacrifice too, is the travel time. And a lot of people don't understand the travel time. This year, obviously you can't scout, but you can, when they stream things, but you can't go to the gym. But it's a major time commitment.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said just those small things. There's nothing like going to see a team live versus watching it on film. I remember my wife be like, well, you have the film. I'm like, yeah, but you don't see their size, you don't see their speed, and you kind of just need that eye look to really see how you compare to them in a lot of different ways. So
yeah,
I know for us, when I coach Arlington Catholic, we're driving the Braintree, we're driving the Peabody, we're driving the Brockton to see Spelman. We're seeing those teams all over. It's not an easy drive. So I totally feel what you're saying on that and get it. And it is a big sacrifice. And that's why I bring up the coaches, because I think it's important for you to be able to say that and say, yeah, this is a lot. I got to go apple picking with my kids this year. I couldn't even tell you the last time I went apple. I probably was a kid, and I couldn't do that in the fall because it's just not there,
It's not time. Yeah.
So, but I want to thank you for coming on. This was great to have you. We do one last segment in the show. It's called a 2-minute drill. And I just fire a bunch of fun, rapid fire questions. I get great feedback from the coaches on this, pertaining to the game of basketball. So I'm going to set the 2-minute timer and away we go. So
let's do this.
Here we go. So, toughest place you played in as a coach, like toughest away game that you guys have, and what gym is always rocking?
Oh boy, there's so many. Always Hingham, is a tough place to get into when you go there. It's unbelievable. Rockland, usually is a pretty. There's so many, but I think, oh God, toughest place. Boy. I don't even. I would have to say it's more, in the tournaments. With the tournaments, they're just so tough to play. Going to Norwood last year was just the environment's awesome. There's nothing better than that kind of environment. It's just great. It pumps you up. It gets you going. But it's tough to play on the road, And then when you get to the semifinals, when you used to be at Massasoit, we were there for those 2 years, with the kids from both schools chanting. It's just. Oh man, it's
cool
tough.
atmosphere.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome.
Cool. What would you say who's the toughest coach that you've gone against in your coaching career? Like someone who just knows you pretty well.
There's quite a few. Jeff Brett, he was a Quincy coach. He's a very good coach. Went against him, many times, and I go back to him with myself. But he studies the game. He knew what we were doing. He's a real tough coach to go up against. God, there's so many good coaches out there that just the Patriot League, and even South Shore League. Mal Lannon Cotton, she was a great coach. Diana Mitchell's a good coach for these are some Rockland players. But I would. Eugene. Basinski at Hingham, he's a tough coach. Tim, God, I could go on and on and on. I don't know if there's one particular coach. It's
a hard question.
It is.
And you don't want to insult anybody because you've had so many great games. You've been coaching for so long, and when you probably get off this call, you're going to be like, oh yeah, this coach was hard too. And that, you'll think of 3 or 4 more. Yeah. I totally get it. What would you say is the biggest victory in your coaching career? What was win number 1 that was like the best win for you?
So yeah, I would probably think that the first win obviously is like the best win. But fortunately I'm in a different position having that undefeated season. So that win at Hingham to go 20-0, I would have to say that's by far the best win. Just to see the kids, the celebration into that accomplishment, that's got to be one of the best wins, of my career, and definitely.
Awesome. If you had a style to play all game on defensively, if you just had the horses to play it, what would you play defensively all game long?
Oh, it would be in your face, in your jersey, man-to-man, full court. You aren't going anywhere. Don't push us around. We're going to push you around. You're not going to want us. You're going to want to punch us in the face. That kind of defense.
Speaking on that line, who's the best defensive player you think you've ever coached?
Oh, boy, I have some good I have some good defenders. Stephanie Flynn was a great defender. She was a great defender. I have a girl this year, Claire Conley. She's a very good defender. Oh man, there's a couple. Those are the two that I can think of off the top. I mean, they're kind of just shut down, and then they've gotten so better. Claire Conley is one of my senior captains this year, and she's not a big scorer, but man, her defense is unbelievable.
Yeah, that's the stuff I love.
Yeah.
Like special teams kids I used to have on teams that would just like love being on it and be the first one in on every tackle, and you just like, eat it up. And those
awesome.
are the kids you remember.
Yeah.
And the last question I'll ask you is what was the biggest piece of advice or the biggest thing you've taken from your dad in the coaching world that you've kind of brought into your program?
That's a good question. It's make the program yours, do what you think is the best, and know this, it may not work, but keep going at it because you're going to get it, and you got to just keep on experimenting. Don't get down on yourself if it doesn't work, because there is a tomorrow. The sun does come up the next day. You're going to get, and just learn from it. I would definitely have to say that's near dear to my heart because it's true. It's true. You're going to have some bad seasons, some good seasons, some good games. Know that there's always another day. It might be the end of the world losing that, but there's always another day, and you can make up for it. But yeah, definitely that.
Awesome. Well, Coach, you survived the 2-minute drill. You made it through it, so that's great. And I want to thank you for coming on here today. I really do my research with coaches and really try to find coaches out there that have unique stories or just been doing something for so long and successful. And when I came across you, I honestly didn't even know about your dad until I really started doing the research. So, I solely found you based off of your accolades, and we read them off. I mean, you do a great job. You run a great program, and I was really lucky to have you on here today. So thank you for agreeing to come on here.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. I mean, this has been great. I'm happy to do it, and thanks for recognizing me too. It's a nice thing, and what you do is great. I've listened to some of your podcasts, and I was really excited about this. I was kind of looking forward, had this date circled, really looking forward to having this conversation, and hopefully we can maybe get a chance to do it again.
Yeah, I would love to. I'll tell you, I have a great alumni of this show that are super supportive. I mean, send me texts. I still talk to a lot of them. I was chatting with her, and Tom Brady just being Tom Brady. These coaches texting me, and it's cool to have a great relationship with them. So I definitely plan on keeping in touch with you and following you guys, and definitely having you back on at some point too.
Great,
which would be awesome. So from Beyond Podcast, I'm your host, Anthony Petrellis. Thanks for coming on again. Tremendous coach, and we look forward to following you in the future. Till next time, guys. Thanks so much.